there's a lot of talk about unity. We're always talking about unity.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last week when we went after AFP, in one of the organizations down in Southwest Florida, I won't say which one in particular, even though it's probably enough of a giveaway right there. Jared Grifoni, who is actually a radio host, does Resistance Radio down there. So is it resistanceradio.com?
Yeah.
Yeah, resistanceradio.com. Check them out. They do a very good job. Jared's a really good guy. They ended up getting into this, an email battle with all the people in this group about the AFP thing with Rick Scott. And there's a lot of people some people that were defending the decision to bring Rick Scott in. Now, I think we've laid out pretty clearly that this guy's not a very good guy. We've done this with, consistently over this program. We've done this. And it's not just because Adrian's running for governor. It's because Rick Scott's a bad guy. Look, I will never, ever, I didn't vote for Rick Scott the first time. And I ain't voting for him again. I'll vote for Howdy Doody in a burqa before I'm voting for Rick Scott.
Well, and
which I would argue he can actually do a better job of.
This is where it comes down to. We wouldn't vote. It's not because we back Adrian that we don't like Rick Scott. It's because of how bad Rick Scott is that Adrian's running.
Yeah. It's a good. Well, he might have run regardless.
If Rick Scott was all about liberty and cutting the budget and restoring our liberties, I don't think Adrian would run.
I'll answer that question. If Rick Scott had kept his campaign promises, I probably wouldn't be running.
Right.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to.
So,
and he hasn't, and that's why I'm out there.
Yeah, and when you find all this information out, and somebody tells you he arrested the sheriff in Liberty County and removed him from office, he increased the budget by $8 billion, he passed Common Core, he signed into law a bill that if a service member came home and voluntarily went in for treatment, one person could take away that person's gun rights for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
He could try to petition to get it back, but it would be very difficult to be able to do that. And they have a huge backlog at the state of Florida for that. And nobody really wants to do it anyway, so there's no real motivation to do it. Once you get put in that category, they put you in the same category as like felons and stuff.
Right.
So you're screwed.
And there's a 20-year backlog to get your Second Amendment rights reinstored. 20-year backlog.
Yeah. So when you see all of this stuff and you're like, I can't be a part of that stuff, that's why I can't join the Republican Party. But at the same time, and this is where I'll go into it, we've helped Republican candidates who were good, principled candidates running for office. Now, it wasn't returned, though, and that's where I bring in Peter Richter, is that Richter was going against Pasadomo. Now, Pasadomo had Bolduc against Pasadomo, which we helped Bolduc.
Yes,
because he was good. And I was like, well, look, if it was Peter Richter against Bolduc, hey, you know what? We're going to help Peter, but may the best person win because Bolduc was a good guy. But we understood that the primary was a separate election, and so we helped the guy out. Once that election ended, the people that we were helping didn't help back.
Right.
Peter needed help, and he didn't get it. He got it from some, so I'm not going to say it was nobody, but he didn't get it the way that it was done for everybody else. And, there's a lot of pushback from some of the really hardline GOPers against those that were helping. And this whole loyalty oath is a big problem, too. But I guess, let me say it this way. I want you to be in the Libertarian Party. I don't want you to be in the Republican Party or anything else like that. But in a way to not be a purist, and in a way to work together, because if we don't hang together, we'll all hang separately. If you choose to remain in the Republican Party, then that's your choice. And as much as I would disagree with that choice, I would not still, if you believed in liberty and freedom, I'd still call you my brother.
Right.
Unless, and here's the big unless the oath that you have to your party trumps the oath that you have to the Constitution. That's where I draw the line. Because we have to, if we're not going to defend and unite on the Constitution, then there's no sense in uniting anyway. Because what happens, and I've seen this before, and I'm starting to see it again, what happens is that libertarians are lulled in in a way of, well, we need to work together, so let's do this nonpartisan, and we agree to it. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, we got to do this to the Republican Party. And then when we get angry about it, they're like, well, you're trying to divide the movement. You can't start this off on one track and then switch the track later on, especially when the track that you're switching on is actually wrong. Again, I did say we the first time. We wrote a book that fully explains it. We wrote one that fully explains how to do this. That if you want to stay in whatever party you want to stay into, that you can do that if you choose to, as long as you're doing the right behavior, which is influence the vote in your precinct or in your neighborhood or whatever you want to call it. But I'll tell you this, I want you to join the Libertarian Party of Florida because I think that personally, you need to have another party. This country was not founded on a two-party system. Somebody else tried to do that too. Well, this country is founded on a two-party system, which is a bunch of crap.
Because the founders hated political parties.
Yeah. I mean, there's quote after quote from George Washington and
Thomas Jefferson. Madison didn't like political parties. None of them did.
Yeah, they didn't like political parties. So you can't come there and claim that because it just doesn't work that way.
And even if you go with the two-party system, the Republican Party was not one of the original two.
Correct.
Because the Whig Party is actually the one that was very prominent, and they started having a lot of infighting. They were ineffective, and that party actually pretty much dissolved in existence, and the Republican Party started to rise. So for all of those people to say, well, you can't have a third party's never going to take over, tell that to the Whigs.
Yeah, because they'd still be around if that was the case. So, and again, if it's a two-party system you want, I mean, we could give it to you, I guess. But if I was going to pick one of the parties to get rid of, I wouldn't go after the Dems because the Dems don't sound like me. The Dems don't use my words when they mean something else. The Dems don't talk about the free market except for in a negative way.
Right.
The Dems don't talk about capitalism except for in a negative way. The Dems are the socialists, that's for sure. But the argument needs to be against liberty and freedom, and the party that claims to be for liberty and freedom ain't the Republican Party. I'm sorry. I just did an hour, or we just did an hour. And again, that wasn't news like from years ago. That was recent stuff.
Like this week.
All of that stuff was recent. Well, the one story for the waterfront properties, that started back in July.
Okay, that started
so that
in
was
July.
a little bit older.
And then there was an update this week.
Because he tried to interview Rick Scott this week.
Right.
But those are all pretty recent stories. So your influence, and again, look, we Libertarian Party's got its own problems too. So I'm not going to say that we don't have problems. Like everybody's got problems, and we don't have a lot of candidates in office right now. We got some. You actually can see an article from one of those people on 1787network.com.
Right.
Bert Culverson or Jim Culverson. But I mean, I'm having a hard time even understanding how you think you've made a change because you haven't. Now, again, I view the recs as just a distraction. Look, going to the rec meeting and saying we're going to bring enough people in to take over the rec. First off, you got a 50% lose rate when you do that. So if you bring in two people, one of them leaves. And one of them leaves because they're thoroughly disgusted at even being in the room. All right? I don't know how many Republicans I talk to that go, man, I feel like I got to take a shower when I leave that place.
Right.
And they do that because the corruption that we talked about in the last hour is also done on a local level in there.
Mm-hmm.
Where you got little fights and turf wars and people taking money and stuff like that. That's happening in your local RECs. And the number of people that go to the REC in big RECs, look, none of them break 500.
No.
Most of them are 150 or 2. How many hundreds of thousands of voters are there out there? Go talk to them. That's who you should be talking to. So even if you're going to try to influence the Republican Party, you can't do it through the rec. You can do that with the active members of the rec, that's of course. And I wouldn't tell you to not go to things if you view it as a chance of networking and trying to get other people to do things for you. But this battle to take the recs It's like the underpants gnomes from South Park. It's like, what's your plan? Well, we're going to steal a bunch of underwear, then we're going to build this big thing, and then something great's going to happen. There's no execution. How are you going to get to the people? How are you going to secure the vote? You're not. You're going to, well, we're going to work through the Republican machine for the get out the vote efforts. Yeah, because that's worked so well in the past.
Well, and this is the fallacy behind the whole thing, is that, and this is what the leadership in the Republican Party count on, is that no matter who they put forward, no matter who they give you, you're going to vote for, and this is in both parties. They just assume that every person that's a registered Republican that's going to go vote is primarily going to vote Republican. And the Democrats basically feel like anyone who's a registered Democrat is primarily going to vote for a Democrat. It doesn't matter who it is. They can give you anyone. And as long as it has an R after their name and you have an R, you're going to vote for that person. As long as they have a D after their name and you have a D after your name, they're going to vote for that person. So what the two parties do, they don't care who actually wins the primary. They could care less. They only focus on getting more R's to the polls than D's to the polls, because they assume that they will win if they win the turnout.
Well, no, that's I'm going to take exception to one thing you said though. They don't care who wins the primaries. I disagree with that.
No, I think we've had it proven to us that they back whoever wins the primary.
No. As long as that person plays ball.
To an extent, yes. Well, they assume that everyone's going to play ball at some point.
Okay. All right.
But
I got some semantic issues with what you said,
okay.
But I understand your overall point, though.
But what, and I was involved in this email chain this week as well.
Yeah.
And it went on for quite a while. And the one thing, and I never commented back, but I was so offended by, and I mean I was really offended to the point where I will never work with that group ever, is that someone wrote back, why we shouldn't, you guys are dividing us. Let's all just focus on fighting the Democrats like we should be focused on.
Yeah,
And
that was funny.
I was so offended by that one statement that I will never work with that group down there ever. Because here's what I'm fighting. I'm fighting tyranny.
Yes.
And I don't care if that tyranny comes with a D or an R or an I or whatever letter you want to throw on. It's the tyranny that I'm fighting.
Yes. Amen.
So you're either unified with me in fighting tyranny or you're my enemy and I'm fighting you as well. And that's exactly the way I feel about it. And I don't ever want to get another email or another someone that says, well, let's just fight the Democrats like we should be. Screw you guys. I'm fighting tyranny. And just to let you know, not every libertarian should be in the Republic. This is the other argument we get. Well, if all libertarians would just be in the GOP like they should be. No, I didn't come from the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And many of us didn't. I came from the left. And I realized that party wasn't a good home for me. And when I looked at the Republican Party, I said, oh, no, that party's too evil for me. And I joined the only party that I do agree with. And guess what? If the Libertarian Party disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't join the GOP if they paid me. That evil organization will never, ever, ever get my number, ever. So don't tell me where I belong. I don't belong there, and I'll never go there. And my mission isn't to fight the Democrats. My mission is to fight tyranny. And you're either with me or get the hell out of my way.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about unity in the movement, I agree with you that we need unity at this point. We definitely need that. But we need unity for the right things. This red team, blue team crap has got to go, first and foremost. But more importantly than that, if your loyalty, we need to unify behind the Constitution. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. We need to unify behind the Constitution. We need to unify behind the Bill of Rights. We need to unify behind liberty in whatever form it is. That's what we need to unify behind. And if you're willing to do that, then you have no greater friend than the three of us, and many, many others. You have no greater friend than that. Look, we work with great conservatives in Pasco County.
Absolutely.
Who identify themselves as conservatives. We deal with great ones. We're putting on a great event, October 5th.
With probably 10 other people who we don't agree with on party affiliation, but they'll say, I'm a conservative. I'm not beholden to any party. And
they accept us for being libertarians, and for the most part, they don't try to tell us to join the join the GOP. But we're able to unify because we agree on the Constitution. If your oath to your party trumps your oath to the Constitution, then please do me a favor and refrain from talking about liberty. Just don't do it because you don't mean it. Because at the end of the day, it's all talk. And I believe it's very disingenuous talk. I believe that if you're an oath, that you need to make it up front that I am loyal to the Republican Party of Florida first above all else. And then if it happens to work that it's within the Constitution, then that gives me a good talking point that I like to use because I like to use those talking points. But, like, let me give you the instance for this election. Like, if you're voting for Rick Scott, like, let's hear a guy going, I like Rick Scott. Rick Scott's my man. He's going to go ahead and do this. Don't talk about liberty, freedom, the free markets, or, I'm trying to get rid of big government because you don't mean it. Either you're too unaware, I'll use a better term here, you're too unaware of what Rick Scott has done, which means that you won't do your due diligence or you're putting your head in the sand of what Rick Scott's really done, in which case you should not be, your opinion should not be one that is one of liberty and freedom or anything like that. Or Rick Scott's bad, but you're playing a game, and then you're playing politics. And where's the slippery slope in that goes from I'm playing the game in politics to I'm collecting a paycheck? I don't know where that is, but I don't think it's very far. So anybody that is going to out in the open support Rick Scott after everything that we've said about him, which is all true, it's all well documented.
It's not what we've said about him, it's what he's done.
Yeah, it's what he's done. If you're still going to support him after that, then look, man, I got nothing else to say to you other than don't talk about liberty and freedom because you don't mean it. Mm-hmm. You just don't. And they're going to go, well, that's just one politician, and, it's not that I really support him, but, we got to stick by. Hey, look, man, if you're having to try to explain yourself that way, then realize that you lost. Just realize you lost the argument, and that now you're trying to just, we got to vote. We can't have Charlie Crist in there, which I do find to be funny because I would imagine that some of those same people were saying the same thing
about Jim Davis.
Yeah, about Jim Davis against. Well, we can't have Jim Davis in there. We got to have Charlie Crist. I mean, he's not perfect, but he's not so bad. He's a dim now.
Yeah.
Chain Gang Charlie, backed by John Morgan, is a dim. And that you can thank yourselves for giving him enough clout in order to make that a reality.
I actually said that just someone, and it was, and I've actually said this quite a few times since we've been, on the campaign trail and that when people say, well, we just can't have Charlie Crist in office. And I said, well, did you say the same thing about Jim Davis when you were voting for Charlie Crist?
Yeah. And you know what they'll do? No, I never said that. That's what they'll say, which is a lie. Right. So once again, you can't believe them. Look, here's the thing. If you go to the Rex, leave the Rex. If you've already left the Rex, leave the party. If you already left the party and you're MPA, join the Libertarian Party. Go through that transgression, or that transgression.
Transgression.
How do you call that? Transition. Go through that transition at your own pace. Again, right. I'm not telling you exactly when you should do these things, but I'm going to take it step by step. So if you've made the decision that you go to the rec, then you should leave the rec in a very public manner. If you've already left the rec, then you should leave the party and go MPA. And if you've gone MPA, then you should leave MPA and you should join the Libertarian Party. Because I'm happy with that, how that goes down.
Well, and this is and we were having a conversation with someone a couple weeks ago, I think it was last week or the week before, and they were talking about how, they weren't really sure if they still kind of thought maybe the two-party system was where you had to work, and, they wanted to work through the GOP, and I said, and here's where my issue always comes in. That when you give, and they'll even say the Republican Party is nothing that I believe in anymore, but it's just a vehicle. And I say, okay, well, when you give them your numbers, you're basically saying that the things that they're doing is okay. Because they look at it and say, well, if people were really upset with what we were doing, they'd leave. And you're not leaving. So they're looking at that as a mandate that they can just keep being corrupt and keep doing all these things and keep ending up in jail. And you're just going to stay in their party and keep giving them your money or giving them your support because they haven't, even with all the corruption, they haven't done enough to make you leave yet.
Yeah. It's almost like no, I'm not even going to use that. That would be a bad one to use. Let me just go somewhere else instead. Now, this is happening whether the Republican Party likes it or not, because in the city of Gainesville, if you look at the voter registration numbers, is that Democrat is number one in the city of Gainesville, as should be expected. It's college town.
Right.
But number two is MPA.
Mm-hmm.
And number three is Republican.
Yes.
So in that town, and I think you're going to see this moving forward in a lot of places, is that MPAs are now taking and becoming the major party. Look, if I would tell you this, if you had 10% of the population of the Democrats, 10% of the Republicans, 10% of the Libertarians, maybe 10% in the Greens, and the other
60.
Thank you for the quick math. And the other 60% all MPA, I actually think that would be the best scenario that you could find. I actually think that would be the best scenario.
And I know it's bad for us to say because we're, leaders of a political party in the state.
Well, if we had 10% in our party, man, I don't think you'd have
happy.
one person complaining. I'm aspiring to 10%. I don't think that's going to be something that's considered a problem.
But I do think that, having a large majority of NPA actually makes it to where every politician is on their toes because the largest voting bloc there is doesn't tell you what they believe. And that's it. I mean, when you're NPA, you're saying, I don't necessarily believe in any of those people. You better say something that makes me want to vote for you. And I think you'll have more honest politics that way.
Yeah. Now, once again, because I want to get to 10%, that doesn't mean that not everybody listening to this program today should not go to their supervisor of elections office and switch over to Libertarian because, trust me, I don't think we're going to, I don't think we have a concern about getting over the 10% and getting mad at this point. But you should switch over to Libertarian right now, though. Look, and if you still want to vote in the primaries, you can always switch back up to 30 days, up to 30 days before. You can always switch back if you want to vote in the primaries. But take your numbers away from them now, though.
Yeah.
Like when your vote, again, that's why I say first step is get out of the wreck. Because if you get out of the wreck, then you're not worried about it. Because if you do the party switching thing, then that will cause your loyalty oath to look somewhat jaded or whatever. And again, if you at this point are still subscribing that you're going to swear loyalty to a political party, because you don't have to do that in the LP, by the way. The only thing you got to do in the LP is sign the non-aggression principle.
I think we'd actually be upset if you said that you were going to be just blindly loyal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're right for us.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be blindly loyal to anyone except the Constitution or freedom,
Yeah, except for liberty, So, and again, it's a big bad rant. And at the end of the day, we're not going to solve this problem tonight. We're not going to solve it tomorrow. But I hope we do solve it before it's too late because we're getting to that point. I mean, you always talk about, exits and off-ramps and stuff like that. Like I view Perot's election as one of the off-ramps. Like you could have taken that election. Mm-hmm. If it would have went for Perot, I think we'd be looking at a completely different country right now. But you went down the Clinton one. Well, then you keep seeing exit ramps, and then Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012, two big huge exit ramps. You didn't take either one of those. Right. At some point, you're going to have to take an exit ramp. I don't know if there's any left.
Florida
or if
has
there's
a
just
chance.
a cliff.
Florida has a chance.
Yeah, Florida has a chance with Adrian Wyllie.